My name's John Nikowski, and my informative speech today is on a particular cultural practice of Hawaii. This is the point at which I would normally introduce my audience. I got a no-show from them today, so you are my audience. Reason I chose Hawaii was basically my honeymoon was in Hawaii in '97, and ever since I've had fond memories and fell in love with Hawaii. My wife and I had an opportunity to go back in 2012 for our 15-year wedding anniversary, and even since then, we've just been talking about when's the next time we go back. And so, effectively, when this assignment came up, I had to think: have I ever been anywhere that had cultural differences? Have I ever been anywhere in the world that I could draw from that maybe I'd have interest in? And Hawaii came up, and reasonably so. They have an interesting native culture there. They're 5,000 miles away. They're isolated on an island. Very interesting stuff. So I started thinking about the Hawaiian culture, and I wanted to think about, what are some things we could overview, and what can I actually investigate. And that started with Hawaiian music. It started with leis. I actually was able to dig out my old lei from the last time I went there. This is a traditional man's lei. The women's are made of flowers and unfortunately don't keep. So if you've ever been to the islands, you also will get to know a little bit about typically the rich history of the queens and kings and the monarchs and the patriarchs, and the history of their spirituality. And really that's where kind of my conversation went in my head. What are some things that they do that intrigue me? One is hula dancing. I think that's kind of very benign, but it's actually a very spiritual aspect of their culture. And so I wanted to get to little know more about the culture itself with regards to hula, and that's what my informative speech is on today: hula dancing. So I'll break that down into three primary categories that we can follow: historical significance, spiritual significance, and cultural significance. So with regards to historical significance, even though it started out as a form of worship, historically speaking, all of the histories, all of the legends, everything else has been passed down through the ages with hula. And so I found this completely fascinating. If there was no written language for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and if hula didn't exist, we really wouldn't know much about the Hawaiian culture, in truth. And so, similar to sign language, it's effectively how everything was communicated for so long. And so, hula, historically, is their story. It's the story of the Hawaiians. That's the historical aspect of the hula dance. The spiritual significance is much larger. Traditionally, the hula was used as a ritualistic, religious dance to honor their gods. There's some gods there that they worship, and the first is Maui. Here's the island Maui. That's actually named after a god. Maui was supposed to be the god that pulled the islands out of the sea. Another god would be Pele. Pele is the god of fire and of the volcanoes. And so on down the line, this is a polytheistic type of view. And it came to be that with the hula, there were very strict rules that they had to set up for the dancing, including not dyeing your hair, not cutting your hair, not dyeing your fingernails, or cutting your fingernails. You weren't allowed to have any intimacy with anybody else, and they had a whole lot of dietary restrictions as well. And so the extreme commitments that they made were supposed to increase the connection with the earth and with the gods and the goddesses. And so they would have bare feet, and they would stomp the ground, and this was the way that they would connect and get their power and energy through the earth. And so very interesting stuff, but it does remind us of some of the polytheistic nations of the Old Testament, or even the zeal of the Pharisees with the Levitical laws, right? And so I found that astounding, just that removed from thousands and thousands of miles, the other side of the earth, that very similar worship took place. initially in Hawaii. So the spiritual significance does tie into the cultural significance of the Hawaiians, and that's primarily because hula almost didn't survive. In the 1800s, missionaries came into Hawaii and they denounced hula. They said this is pagan practice, this is pagan worship, and rightfully so. There was a gentleman, the king at the time, King Kalakaua, decreed to keep hula alive, and to this day, he's basically the person that kind of rallied around all the Hawaiians there and credited with maintaining this cultural icon. So, that said, there's actually two types of hula. So the first is called hula kahiko. Hula kahiko is honoring the traditional dance. It's strictly chanting. It's specific dance moves, as I said, with their feet. They're stomping their feet. They're chanting. And they're doing it to the beat. Their percussion is a gourd called an ipu. And this reflects the original hula. The second type is a modern version and really only came about as a result of the westernization of the islands. This is what you typically see at a luau or really anywhere else on the island. It's called hula awana. And this is done now with music, ukuleles, and typically more entertaining. It's valued that way. And the hands do the talking while the body stays with the beat. And so there is some communication there. It is a form that originated in the kahiko. There is still some speaking not derived from worship, but the primary form was worship. And so, to summarize, historically, hula is their ancient language. Spiritually, hula is really very sacred to the natives, and it represents worship to their gods. So a lot of these things that you would see if you went there of the traditional kahiko, blowing of the conch, doing specific things, this is really to represent worship to their gods. And culturally, hula is still quite significant to them, even this day. And as sad as it is, it's primarily due to tourism because the awana is really a watered down version of that, but it is a cultural icon of Hawaii, hula dancing. So I hope this provided insight into the Hawaiian cultural practice of the hula dance. Thank you for your time.